Here we go is right. Welcome back to the weekend 34. Today's the last day I'll be saying that on this Memorial Day weekend, and that's okay because great things are in the mix, including great continued guests on our new platform, like our next guest joining us, who I know I'm going to put him on the spot, but already tell him he's coming along for the ride. He will be joining us more in the future. Right, Mark? Before I say hi to you, right, Mark? You'll be with us again, always.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay, good. You have to say yes when I put people on the spot. That's what I like about it. So, our next guest is an Army veteran who reached the rank of Sergeant Major. He's done some really interesting things in the military that not everyone is aware of or has access to. So, Mark Reilly is joining us. We're excited to talk about the Washington Tattoo Project. I got to meet Mark a couple years ago, and we've stayed in contact, and we connected, of course, over music. And he sort of blew my mind with some facts about music in the military that I was unaware of that he's going to share with us today. But he's with the Washington Tattoo. You can head over to the WashingtonTattoo.com. It's a 501c3 organization based in Virginia. They offer world class music and culture programs in the Washington, D.C. area. They've got programming for all ages, and their goal is to offer diverse, exceptional musical events, education, and professional networking opportunities for a variety of audiences, while creating, of course, awareness and providing support for the needs of veterans and first responders. The military, yeah, man, I mean, as I said yesterday, Jim, the largest employer of musicians. And Mark, as you know, when I say employer and musician in the same sentence, it's an odd thing to hear. As the Nashville artist, I say, what does that even mean? So you're going to tell us more about it. But welcome back to the program, Mark Reilly. Good morning. How are you?
I am blessed and honored to be here. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, Lindsay, for having me. It's great to connect with both of you again.
Listen, I have a funny thing to tell you about my dad by way of talking about General Grant. General Grant was tone deaf, and he said he only knew two songs his entire life, Dixie and the other one, is how he kind of put it. Now, my father was not and is not as tone deaf as General Grant was, but he's not a big music guy. It doesn't land on him. The only songs he consistently sings around the house, the ones that he actually knows, are the ones he actually picked up from his time in military service. The connection
Mhm.
between music and the military dates back to the founding of this country and has always been, particularly in the Scots Irish rendition of the military, a very big part of how we are set up. They're integral to one another, are they not?
Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, if you even go back to ancient China and the Greeks and the Romans, they were using music to move people from one place to another. And so there's a very kind of almost organic and even primal feeling when you talk about music, the emotions, and then military. And so the beginning of the country, we had musicians, they were really communication devices. So you use the drum, the fife, the bagpipe, the bugle to move people from point A to point B. But today we even see that through basic training cadences, boot camp cadences, where people are singing together, they're moving together, but it's all through the power of music. And also, it used to regulate their day. You'd hear reveille in the morning, you'd hear taps at the end of the evening. You have a call called tattoo, which way back in the day actually was the call the drummer would play around town to tell the tavern keepers to turn off the beer taps and send the soldiers back to bed. So the drum call tattoo literally meant last call for alcohol back in the day.
I love it as a cue, and it makes me think about Mark when my daughter was first born. There was some weird chanting music. I don't even know how we found it or came about, but it's what I would play, and it's how she would fall asleep on my chest and take a nap. And to this, she's 6 now, and when I put that on, it is like a cue. If I still put it on today, I put it on the car. We were on a long car drive yesterday, and I put it on it when I needed her to close her eyes and get off her iPad. And sure enough, I put that song on and her head just slowly went down. So music as a cue
Mm.
is just fascinating to me how it works. And so when you say, it's between different songs or different cues, then soldiers knew, okay, now almost instead of being told go here now, that song meant go here now, go there now, do this now, wrap up now. And is how in your vast knowledge of music, what is it about, is it repetition of playing that over and over? Are there certain musical cues that connect with our brain to say this kind of cues more of a sleepy versus a get up and go? What is it about music and the tone in it that creates those cues for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's very interesting. So over the years, you had different types of rhythms that meant different things. It meant, reload, charge, flank right, flank left, and the soldiers were trained. And if you go back to General George Washington's army, he had Frederick von Steuben, who was the one who came in during Valley Forge, and he trained the troops to be a professional army. And in that training, it does have quotes from George Washington specifically saying that a good fifes and drums keeps good order and discipline with an army. So if you think about how regiments would move back in those days, they'd have to memorize the sound and the rhythm of that movement to go along with what they would do in battle. Same thing. So if the Americans did that, the British also did that. If the British did that, the French did that. If the French did that, the Spanish did that. So every single country that had a modern army in the 1700s had a form of music that was specifically different to that nation. So if you go to Scotland today, you hear bagpipes and drums. That would have been the Scottish and UK version. If you look at the White House today and you see the old guard and you hear these continental musicians playing fifes and drums, that was the American version of it. So we have these kind of resonating styles that go basically through our ancestral heritage, whether you're Spanish, English, French, German, even Chinese or African. There are very specific rhythms that would go back into your history. And just to speak on that too, with what it looks like today, military bands the military is the largest employer of musicians in the world, and it roughly employs between 6,000 and 7,000 musicians across the globe at the various bases and installations. And so when you look at what music still does today, it is honoring those folks. It's doing change of command ceremonies. It's doing promotion ceremonies. It's doing funerals. And to do music right, you needed to be trained, which goes all the way back to what George Washington said, where good order and discipline needs to have good musicians to be able to perform it. And so there's a piece of honor, there's a piece of pride, but there's a lot of history of who we are as a military force is connected deeply and directly to the power of music.
It's interesting, two things that you made me think of. The first of which is, I still to this day hum both When Johnny Comes Marching Home and The Minstrel Boy. Of course, standard songs of the Fighting 69th. And I think about the fact that I got them from my father singing them around the house. And then I think about the fact that, it gets passed down. That's the other thing. It becomes part of our common cultural collective. The other thing I wanted to tell you both is that this is an anecdote from the Battle of New Orleans. Jackson was riding up and down the ramparts that he had constructed, and the British were in the fog, making their way closer and closer. They were playing bagpipes, and he saw a young American soldier who was shaking, Lindsay, and he said, "What's going on, soldier?" He said, "It's those bagpipes, sir. They give me the chills." And he looked at him and he said, "They're meant to." And there is something else about that, too, that for all of the kind of discipline, too, is that music can create a mood that can actually spook an enemy. Music can create a mood that can actually inspire people on the ground to do great things as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you go back to what was called the Janissaries, and this was prior to the American Revolution, it was when the Turkish Empire would put cymbals and gongs and drums and pipes. They would put it as this cacophony of sound. And it was really meant to scare the bejesus out of the enemy, and it did so very, very well. And so when you talk about Mozart and you talk about the collection of Western music becoming modern music in the early days, they used those instruments like a jingling Johnny and a serpent and these kettle drums, and you see a lot of those still today when you see the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. And so initially it was to scare the enemy, but then that became a sense of pride of, I was able to scare the enemy. I was able to defeat them, and it was psychological warfare. And so if you take the common things that are happening now with psychological warfare, communications, drones, leaflets, how we take our public affairs and how we deploy them across the globe, that goes directly also back to the initial power of music and why was music brought onto the battlefield. So those are really great points, and I did not know that about General Jackson in New Orleans. That's a great piece of history.
We got to take a really quick break. Lindsay, you want to get a question in here to set up before we actually head off, or come back? We'll come back on the other side with some stuff to set this
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
We're so thrilled to have you here. Take a quick break, take a breather, get a little timestamp in here, and continue the conversation going forward on this Memorial Day weekend. Brought to you by our friends, of course, over at Fastport, over at the Fastport Studios here in New Orleans. Mark Reilly, the president and CEO of the Washington Tattoo, joins us. Let's take a moment, Dre, to just break us away. As Dre has shown us too, the military has not only created their own songs, they've been the inspiration for many a great one. At 8:17 in the morning, by the way, I want to take a moment here to thank our friends at neverrollalone.com. That is the multi-service fuel card. They've been doing that gig since '78. If you're an over-the-road trucking company looking for generous lines of credit, quality customer service, or even a nationwide network of fuel-saving truck stop locations, head to neverrollalone.com at 8:17. And we are not rolling alone this morning. Mark Reilly joins us, Lindsay Lawler, Jimmy Mack for the last Sunday edition, the last edition of the Weekend 34. Hey, Lindsay.
Hey, and welcome back, Mark. Mark, you and I have had some really cool conversations, and we tend to dream and scheme when we see each other, and then hop on the phone, and then get about our busy life. But there's so many things that so much access here, and Jim Hart and I actually, who joined us from the Purple Heart Foundation, he joined us yesterday, have discussed this as well. But I, as a musician myself, that I did not serve in the military, but I have gotten to perform at so many. I performed, at Arlington Cemetery and for troops multiple times, and gotten to write some songs that are in honor of our military. But it's a delicate line, Mark, and I'd be curious your take on civilians making music about these kind of it's like we want to give back, and I want to honor, and I want to be respectful, but I also know what I don't know, which is so much. And so what to you is that line? And then we're going to talk culture here as it pertains to what you do at Washington Tattoo, but just as a musician yourself, musician and veteran yourself, what is that line between making music um, in or out of military service, if that makes sense.
So
Mark?
I,
Oh, sorry.
yep. I don't, can you hear me? Are you still there?
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you now.
Great. Great, great, great. Yeah, so it definitely is an interesting line because when you're in the military, there are absolutely standards that you have to uphold. So when you're doing performances, or you're playing in Arlington National Cemetery, or you're rendering honors, that music is governed by regulation. So there are Army regulations that state exactly the type of version you're supposed to play. It has to be approved through Department of Defense regulations, and so there is absolutely a box when it comes to performing music while you're in the military. When it comes to civilians that are wanting to honor military members, it's definitely more of a free range. But I still think you have to also just think of how you would want to honor and respect those folks. So the types of lyrics you choose, the style of music you choose, you have to almost kind of put yourself, if you are not in a military uniform, but almost put yourself in it mentally and say, if I was wearing this uniform and I was trying to, get soldiers or sailors or Marines or airmen, inspired, what does that look like when I start to create and craft a piece of music? Because you think about it and you go music from back in the day, from marching on the battlefield in colonial uniforms, going all the way through kind of the USO tours with Bob Hope, and then you go today and you hear, Metal or Three Doors Down, or you hear, anything with Imagine Dragons. Soldiers are still listening to those types of music, and music changes. So you have to do it respectfully. I still think you can do it respectfully and be creative and innovative, but there's a box that you have to put around yourself. And to be quite frank, when you put that box around there, some of the most amazing creativity is there because of the parameters, because it
Mm.
forces you to have to make some type of excellence and some type of quality, because you can't just be 100% freeform. So I think there's an interesting conversation, very philosophical, can get very technical with the types of chords and the types of lyrics that you put to it. But I think it's a great question.
Well, and I just to follow up on that, it's this is sort of similar, sort of different, but I think about within trucking, I've written so many songs where when we sit down to go write the song, it's with a dedicated project with it. Like we are writing this for Reefs Across America, for women in trucking, for whatever the cause may
Mm.
be. And so it's and similar when in military songs, it's like we're sitting down with a mission and a focus and a what like you when you're talking about parameters, that's what made me think about it because it's very different than getting in a room and being like, "What do we want to write about today? Let's see what comes out." And that's very different than writing. It's almost like a school assignment when you sit down to be like, "Okay, I'm writing with a purpose behind, or I'm telling this actual soldier's story, or this mission
Right.
story." And it's a very different thing. And you're right, it's a different kind of. I kind of never really thought about it in that way. I thought it and in my head it took away the creativity, but how you just said it, I'm like, no, it opens up just a different kind of focus creativity, I guess, right?
Right, right. No, and I think it refines it. It makes you have to be
Yeah.
refining and you have to be purposeful. And if we're going to do a veteran that's coming from, New York City, right, and they're from 1945 and 1944 and they went into the war maybe late, there are all of these details in that story that pertain to that military member's story so specifically that, maybe it does put, in one sense, a handcuff on there, but it also keeps you straight on the straight and narrow of let's really make sure that this song and the lyrics, the rhythms, the chord structure, is it more of a mood of, is it minor? Is it more positive? Is it negative? And it keeps you on a straight and narrow path of what is the intent of the song and what is the outcome meant to portray.
You could make a case, as Lindsay and I have talked about before, though, that specificity, that making you hone in like that actually creates better music because the
Hmm.
bromide, the halcyon, that sort of stereotype or cliche, can't find its way into a song that actually is grounded in a very specific time period and a very specific individual or individuals. So there is a level of freedom that actually comes with actually asking somebody to write within the context and framework of a specific moment, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Because if you're completely on a white open canvas, sometimes that's the hardest thing to do is come up with the concept, come up with it, and almost you're having to imagine something that may or may not exist, and you could get it wrong because maybe what your thoughts are of honoring somebody is not if it's so open and free form. And so I think, and I've seen that done many ways. I've done a lot of writing over the years. I've done a lot of coaching. I've done a lot of clinicking, and I've worked with a lot of folks who do a lot of writing, and they do want to work with military members. And we have to unpack kind of, it doesn't have to be a hard box, but what is the box that we're putting ourselves in so that we meet that intent of the outcome of the song?
So Washington Tattoo, we're talking with Mark Reilly, president of the Washington Tattoo. You can head over to thewashingtontattoo.com. I want to give you a chance to open up here and talk about kind of the cultural bridges you guys are working on that you dive into because you have so many different programs and you really are bridging the gap and in the world, not just here in the States, but culturally, globally. So talk to us a little bit about what you do at Washington Tattoo and how it stands on a cultural platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we just went through a purpose statement exercise. I'm just going to read it straight up. So, the Washington Tattoo exists to serve and empower veterans and military connected communities through the healing, unifying, and transformative power of music and cultural heritage. So, we are founded by veterans for veterans. We're an organization that blends disciplines of military music, community arts, and trauma informed programming to create meaningful opportunities for reflection, reintegration, and purpose after service. And so, when we have a mission, that's one thing, but our purpose is our outcome. And what we've been able to do is take my military background and working with military musicians throughout my entire career and then support those folks that really want to be connected through music, that have really come through some challenging trauma, whether it's through PTS or TBI, and we've started to build some great relationships with Syracuse University Institute for Veteran and Military Families, as well as George Mason University, and take neuroscience and plug that into how does music actually change the brain. And we do it. We feel it. We get the chills when we hear a great song. When we see taps, we cry when we hear this, this emotive music being played. And so what we've been able to do is build events and programs around the power of that moment. And so when you feel that music and you feel all of the tingles, there's a recipe to be able to make that all happen. And so what we've done with the tattoo is we build, very large scale events. We'll have several hundred performers, from drill teams to bagpipes and drums to singers to rock bands. And what that does is that creates a general interest for the rest of our programming that we have around the rest of the year, which we do have music wellness cohorts. We have one per quarter, and we bring veterans in and we unpack why and how does music connect to your veteran experience. And so it's been a blessing to be a part of it. My background in military music has really been a super help to connect with other musicians who want to give back to that veteran community. So it's just been a privilege and an honor to be able to do this work.
It's interesting too, Lindsay, because it's almost the reverse stream of what we we're talking about before, where you use musical events and not I don't mean broad and not focused, but where you use these more traditional musical events to then kind of pivot your way into a way to kind of specifically hone in on veterans and veterans' needs and issues. Is that fair?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think when you look at the veterans issues that are out there, we're almost finding out new versions of them every day. And, when it comes in this, things no one really wants to talk about. When you talk about, getting hit with an IED and TBI and PTS, I think that's something that a lot of folks, have at least heard. But when you're talking about folks who have been, sexually abused, or folks who have, been beaten or raped, like there's horrible things that have happened in certain folks' experience. And you can't run away from it. And I think that's one of the things music allows, is it allows us to help and support a very traumatic experience for any veteran that has experienced really any kind of trauma, and find a way that music can start to put their life back together. And it's been really, really something special to be a part of. And we're the Washington Tattoo has become kind of a disruptor in this space, and it's exciting. It's tough work when you're looking in someone's eyes and they're sharing those really challenging moments. You've got to be on your game to be able to have some kind of, not solution, but at least a guide or a path to get them from darkness to light.
I love that. I just noticed on your website under programs, you have rudiments to recovery and then rudiments to opportunity, and I think those two are so. It's let's that to me sums up the through music what you're doing. Let's help in recovery, and then and then where do we take that and grow from here. And I would love to have you Mark. We'll be launching a show called We Should Write, and it's about the healing power of writing. And I don't mean that just for people that do it professionally, but just that's journaling, whether it's typing something on your phone, whether it's just saying the thing out loud. Sometimes it's just saying it out loud and realizing I can move forward to this. So thank you for what you do. Everyone head on over to thewashingtontattoo.com. More to come with you, Mark. Thank you for your service and for your time today.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you, Jay.
You got it, my friend. Guys will be back with baseball and country and western music news on your Weekend 34's final edition.